My name is Darol Ryan. I'm managing partner and head of sales here at Main Management. I'm joined with another partner of mine, Dick Fredericks, who was before here an all-star analyst on Wall Street for 17 years before he moved to corporate finance, where he did some of the larger banking deals in this country. Dick started the firm with Kim and Jim Considine 20 years ago. We're celebrating our 20th year anniversary. And I wanted to sit down with Dick today to have a little fireside chat about a few topics. And so let's jump right into it. Dick, you're one of the shrewdest investors I've ever met. And what are some of the guiding principles that you've lived by in your long career for managing your own money and your family's money?
Well, it started early because I went to Columbia Business School, and thinking I knew everything at the time, I borrowed money, which my parents were willing to pay for my graduate school education. But I borrowed money and thinking I'll put it in the market and make some money on the side. And I lost it fairly quickly, all of it. So when you pay back a loan, when you have nothing to show for it, it is a very large lesson. So that was lesson one. And, and then, I was a young buck on Wall Street and there were a few bear markets early in my career, and I tended to scare out. I sold at the wrong time, and probably about 1974, I realized this is stupid. I had to probably pay a few more lessons along the way, but I still own stocks that I bought in 1974. One good example is Wells Fargo, where my dividend exceeds the cost of my purchase every quarter now. So I know that the notion of long-term investing, I'm a huge fan of compounding. And so, and then along the way, you learn things like a bear market lasts 18 months and a bull market lasts 3 to 5 years in general. So if you can wait those out, I really am more of a buy and hold person than not. And also the idea that I was a bank stock analyst, probably, I was involved in the things, which at the time were bank stocks, and they're not wild stocks. So I landed up owning some of those for a very long time.
And you always said the only free lunch in investing is diversification.
Absolutely. That is the only free lunch. I'm trying to remember the fellow name from Chicago that was at one of the big firms that was always an advocate of that. And every time I heard it, I thought, yes, that's right. In my own investing, I found that when we sold my old firm, Montgomery Securities, actually before that, we had a situation where we came in and we might want to make sure that we were doing everything the right way. We had the goose that was laying golden eggs. And so at that point in time, I diversified into fund managers. And it was in a way, it was like a baseball team. If I had diversification, and if I really had the right horses, the right players, and one was down, I'd add to that. Because if it was true that they were one of the great athletes, you put money in when they're down, not up. Mm-hmm. And I followed that for a long time, and I've diversified my whole career.
And that's one of the reasons we started Main Management 20 years ago, using ETFs only, because ETFs are wonderful vehicles to get that diversification.
Let me make a comment on that, which is interesting. So the first ETFs that I invested in was when I was U.S. ambassador to Switzerland. I did it because they were easier to fill out the forms. Yeah. But as an analyst, a single stock analyst, I could be right on the industry and pick the wrong name. With an ETF, you can be right on the industry, and some of the ones underneath the umbrella of the ETF could do poorly. But overall, if you had the industry fundamentals right, you do much better. It's a very elegant way to manage money.
Shifting gears for a minute, you developed one of the terms, the back half of the chessboard, at least for Main Management purposes. You helped create the thematic innovation strategy. Can you tell us a little bit behind that and kind of the premise when you first started creating that almost 2.5-3 years ago?
Well, it comes from a long time reading and things that fascinate me. I mean, it almost goes back to the period of enlightenment, back in the late 1700s. What drove that? Because people used to think the economy was a fixed pie. It's not a fixed pie. If you and I trade, it's not an equal thing. We're both better off. You believe whatever you bought from me is worth the money, and I believe the money you give to me is more valuable to me than whatever I sell you. We're both better off. It's plus, not equal. But anyway, you can look at that relative to all kinds of things, and I love the idea of innovation, and I love the idea of man standing on the shoulders of others. And so I've studied all for a long time innovations, and there's books I've read that kind of fascinate me on that. One might be Johann Norberg's. He wrote one on 10 major themes, and there's other people that write on that sort of thing. Matt Ridley would be another, and I love reading those kinds of books. And my grandfather taught me how to play chess. And if you think about compounding, and the way that the chess was started, people don't know whether it was China or India, but somebody started it, and they went to the emperor if it was India, or if they went to China if they went to the Maharaja in India. The guy was fascinated by it because it's really a game of war, and said, give this inventor whatever he wants. And of course, if he's smart enough to start chess, he was smart enough to know a little bit about math. And he said, well, I just want to feed my family. So I'll come back tomorrow, and why don't you give me 2 grains of rice, and the next day, and then double on the next square, et cetera, et cetera. And it took the Maharaja or the emperor till square 32 to realize,
if you double it every time.
Right. And the story goes, he either beheaded the inventor, or the inventor became the Maharaja or the emperor. Because it's square, if my memory serves me right, at square 64, you would have 8 billion trillion grains of rice, and you would need more than two times the Earth's surface to support it.
Yeah, my son and I did a little experiment, I don't know, a couple of months back, and we were on the 3rd line, and he was like, wow, this is starting to get big. We're running out of pennies. I said, yeah.
And you're referring to the old thing about, would you rather have a penny doubled every day for 30 days
or $1 million?
And then so some people will think about it, and they might say the penny, and then you say, well, what about if I give you 2 million?
Yeah. And
often they change their mind. But and technology works the same way. We've had, through Moore's law, a doubling of speed and capacity, which is really a 4x every 18 months or so. So the pattern just goes straight up. And if you think about the penny doubled, it at day 29, well, the total is $10.7 or $8 million. So let's say it's $10 million. And the day before it's 5 million, and the day before that is 2.5. I mean, you're under $1 million in about 6 days.
Yep.
So, but people don't realize how many doubles when they can't see it.
Yep. That works with investing, but it also works with the thematic strategy that we have. We've got some great strategies in there, which we talk to a lot of investors about, and people are obviously very interested. Let's switch gears again to, I know you're very attuned to the economic numbers. I mean, you talk about them quite often. You and Alex do a deep dive on a lot of things. What are sort of the top 2 economic indicators you look at, and then where do you think we are right now?
Okay, a couple of things. One, I'm attuned to them because as a bank analyst, I had to force feed myself the economy, starting a zillion years ago, because the banks are involved in every aspect of the economy, full stop. Even back in the mid 80s, early to mid 80s, we were worried about countries going out of business and LDC loans. And then at one point in time in my career, everybody was worried about tanker loans, when at that point in time, the cost of a barrel of oil was $9. All these tankers were just scrap heap at that point. But anyway, so the banks have been involved in the whole economy. So I've always been interested in the economy, because if you have a notion of where we're going, then that helps your overall investing. So it's hard to say, 1 or 2 things, but one of the things I will say, which will probably surprise people, everybody says the economy is 70% consumer, and so they focus on the consumer. Nothing wrong with that approach, but who hires the consumer? The businesses are the backbone of the economy. And by the way, they hire people, they pay their wages, they pay their benefits, they make stuff that people want, and they provide the dignity. So, when they're profitable, things expand, and when they contract, when they're not profitable, they contract. But what you really want is for corporations to do well, because then compensation will do well, and then the consumer will do well, and then the consumer purchases, which are 70% of the economy, work. So I actually start with that. I'm a huge, but going back, if I had to look at two, one would be the 10-year, because that's your free source of, not free, but I mean that's your
Cost of capital.
Cost of capital and competing vehicles all the time, and the other probably would be jobs itself. When jobs are growing, the economy is healthy, and I also again believe in the dignity of a job, and when jobs are really running, those at the lower end of the spectrum have a better shot. So I look at that very, very closely. But then I would go back to this business thing, because again, they hire the people and they make the stuff.
So where is it telling you are right now? I mean, we just got a jobs number today. It was fine, but I know you've got.
I did look at that. We're in a funny place right now. We have very low unemployment and we have inflation, but the jobs number today was above people's estimates. But included in that was the household numbers are down. We're down 350,000, and the labor force shrunk by 350,000. Actually, the first one was up 350, or down 315. But so there's been some machinations in it. Another one is the participation rate has been down, and it's kind of creeped back up. But we want more people in the labor force. People have dropped out, so I think that the 3.6% number is a little bit artificial. Now, having said that, where do I really believe we are? Well, we've had 1 quarter of negative GDP. Everybody now is looking at the Atlanta Fed GDP now, and that's now a minus 1.9%. Whatever this quarter comes in, and by the way, I think it's going to be a negative number, but let's say it's flat, average the two, we feel like we're in a recession, and I think we are. And the Fed did a study. They do it every 3 years, and so we're now up for one this summer, I think it is, where 40% of the population could not put their hands on $1,000. Mm-hmm. Those people absolutely feel we're in a recession, mm-hmm. And so we're fragile, and we're fragile with higher inflation than we want or need. And need is a lousy term. We don't need inflation, but much higher than we should have. And so the question then is, will Powell assert his inner Volcker views or not? I think that he was more dovish before he got reappointed, and now I think he's acting hawkishly. But we've now had some rollover in certain things, and so the question will be how sticky inflation is.
Right, and when does he pivot? If inflation has peaked, does he pivot and when?
Well, and you could have incrementally better numbers, but let me give you, mathematically, if you look at the last 12 months of the CPI, we're going to drop off a high number and add on. And like the Atlanta Fed has a GDP now, but the Cleveland Fed has a nowcasting thing for inflation. They and Bloomberg are predicting 1% for the month of June. If we print a 1% number, the year-over-year CPI number will go up, not down.
Interesting.
So, and it looks like, and then we have several low months that we're going to be dropping off. Mm-hmm. So it looks to me like at least the year-over-year numbers are going to be high into the NFL season.
Let's. I've got 2 more questions for you. Look, I know you're a voracious reader. You've given me a lot of great recommendations on books. What are your top 5 books? And maybe there's a few in the sort of financial world. Maybe there's a few outside of that. But can you rattle off? I think people care on some good summer reading.
Well, as a kid, I've been a huge reader since I was a kid. Even in the point you've heard stories about people, reading with a flashlight under the covers. That was me. and that started with the Hardy Boys and Chip Hilton, which was a series of fun books on sports. But some of the ones when I think about that kind of answer, I would split it into business books, which I'm not as keen on, or other books. But the ones I remember the most, I still remember most of the cases of every Sherlock Holmes case. I read literally that whole series in one weekend. I went into my bedroom and I never came out until I read the whole thing. But anyway, Lord of the Rings, I still remember every character, and I can't remember. I mean, I must have read that 25 years ago. Other ones like that would be To Kill a Mockingbird, Caine Mutiny, Atlas Shrugged, which I would say is a business book as well as one for pleasure. And then recently, and I think you're going to ask me about it, maybe I would put in there Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle. Turning to the business side, I would say, from an investment standpoint, I took a course at Columbia by a guy named Roger Murray, who was a disciple of Benjamin Graham. And so, of course, I put in there The Intelligent Investor. Another one would be The Masters of Money, which was the only time I think I've ever seen Buffett actually say what kind of company he really likes to invest in and what really makes a great investor. Obviously, people have written about him, but this was him talking about both of those, and that was good. Another one, which is a classic, which is one you give to your kids, is The Richest Man in Babylon.
Yes.
Which is another book that talks in a way about compounding. And The Richest Man in Babylon would put aside 10% every year. And then he also had some other advice in there, like don't lose it, and do your homework, and your home was your biggest investment. I mean, it is so classic, it's unbelievable. And then I would put in a couple of. I love the fellows that influenced our founding fathers. Clearly, one would be Adam Smith, and I've read virtually all of The Wealth of Nations closely. And another one would be On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. So that's a lot of books. But
I'm gonna get the list, and because people are gonna ask for that list. This has been great today. Let's finish up with this. I know you're doing something. As am I. We're both big believers on education. We talk about our kids, giving them the best we possibly can. Tell our clients and us all here on this podcast what you're planning next overseas.
Darol knows what I'm doing, so that's an interesting question, because I created a scholarship from my alma mater, Georgetown, to Oxford. I always wanted to go on my own scholarship. Through a lot of discussions and meeting people and such, in about 10 months, I'm going to go to Oxford to study a course that I designed. It'll be a 2-month course on the fellows that influenced our founding fathers, like I just mentioned, John Stuart Mill, guys like Hume and Smith. Of course Smith, and Locke and Ricardo, and so I'm gonna do that this coming year.
That's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Well, have a pint of Guinness for me over there, because it's that's a wonderful place.
Yeah, and I just hope my wife will come with me. It's only 2 months, and she says, "Do I have to come?" And I said, "Yeah, you want to come, because then I'll use Oxford as a base, and we'll go do stuff on the weekend."
That's great. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you all for listening. Again, Darol Ryan from Main Management. Thank you for the partnership. You can visit our website for more. We're going to be doing more of these over the next couple of months. And thank you very much. Thank you, Dick.
Okay.